Hey, Elyse.
Hey, Martin. Good to
This is
see you.
absolutely great to see you too. And this is a part of a series we talked about of honoring Greg and talking a little bit about our great experience of knowing him during his life. And my intention is to get several people that might be comfortable doing it. Just take a little bit, talk about it, get it on YouTube as memories potentially, and then I'll back it up in a secondary way, and my thought would be maybe one day it could be available for his kids. I knew I'd cry when I thought that.
Man,
you know
I know.
but this is a celebration of Greg's life is how I view this, and the wisdom he brought us. And so I thought, well, I'll start with the fact of Greg is the ideal person to partner up, because I believe you want to have a partner that compliments you and challenges you and in business. And he was wicked smart, and he was a sponge for information. But one of the most valuable aspects that Greg brought to the table professionally is his strong core of values, of ethical business practices, and of really making sure we kept a high standard on the show. Because I easily like people, and I like to have someone a little more discerning than me to team up with in a good way, where here's our show and we'd have the conversation, and there'd be two main conversations. One, is this moving the ethical values that we believe in business practice, which is true win-win? And the other thing is, does this advance the mission of the show? And sometimes we'd have pretty good arguments and discussions, and they got heated. And I think I was the one better at bringing up the issues to bring up, and he was the one to fight through it with me, come to a commitment, and move forward based on values. And that's a gift that you don't get from many people.
Yeah. No,
They have those values to start with. They've developed it. They have a right and wrong where you can either agree with them or not.
Yeah. Yeah. That was one thing that I always loved about Greg, is you always knew exactly where you stood with him, no matter what. And I remember just thinking about some of his very definite, strong feelings and opinions on things. So one of the things that always made me laugh about some of his, and it's like, there's no right or wrong here, but he hated network marketing.
Right.
And so we would try to bring network marketers on the show, and he'd be like, just no. It was, but so here's what's funny. And I remember I was thinking about this before we went to record today, is, my husband, Jason, for a while, and he's not doing this anymore, but he was involved in Amway for a while. Yeah. And I remember a day where he came to me and he's like, honey, I think I made a mistake. And he had hired somebody to add connections for him on LinkedIn and to send them a message, telling them about the opportunity and all that. But what he didn't know was that the woman was going to send it to Greg. And so he accidentally pitched Greg on Amway, which is the worst of everything that you could do. But here's to Greg's testament. He wrote him back he was very clear on how he felt about that. But he said, hey, actually, social selling is not about cold pitching. Let me share with you some things that you can do next time that would help. And it was humorous. I remember laughing with Greg about it later, because it was probably the last person on the earth you want to do that to, but he handled it really well, and he was kind to Jason, and we had a laugh about it. But to me, there's so much humor in that. But when I think about Greg, he was always super clear on what he believed in, and he had really high standards and really high integrity. And I think that's part of what made him so awesome to work with.
Yeah, and I want to add that, because I think that's as valuable as other things. And of course, I have lots of friends that are successful and great in Amway, and we had a agreed upon agreement. I'm for anything that people can ethically make money for, so mine's pretty broad. But to him, that didn't get through his filter. It was very black and white. And I remember, I think it was shared with me as well. And the thing that I admired was, one, he was clear about his boundaries. And two, even if you got mad at him, you had to admire his commitment to. The second thing is, if you want to do marketing, this is, in his view, the wrong way to do it, where the first connect was a message on LinkedIn. And so there are two lessons in that piece. Is one of the things is we were big on, and he was too, is doing our best to walk our talk. That doesn't mean we both didn't have hypocrisies and stuff. But, if I called Greg on a hypocrisy, obviously not publicly in front of the room, but in a private of, we're also, I'd kind of nudge him on it. He'd pause a minute. It wasn't comfortable, but he'd pause it. And I'd say, well, over here, you're pretty good at that. So just want to remind you of that one. And you could see he was listening. And I think that's one of the lessons learned from Greg is being proven we're wrong is never comfortable. Having the guts to acknowledge it is real leadership and courage. And it doesn't mean put him on the spot in public or anything else. But I experienced him as someone, if you caught it and you brought that up, he'd either agree to disagree or, he had a pause. He didn't always go, you're right, but there was a pause where he saw it sunk in. And that meant a lot to me. And so that was such a good example. I think I was brought into this circle as well. He called me. Here's what occurred. And I'm just going, poor Jason, because I love Jason. I mean, I met him. I was excited to help him. Because he's such a good-hearted, decent man. If he's trying to make a living to add, he wanted to expand his income to contribute to the family. He was looking out for both of you, But I think that's such a great story. But there's also a lesson in there from Greg is, it's like have the courage. It's almost like have the courage to make someone angry. Because my view is if you make everyone like you, no one will respect you ever. And they'll actually hate you anyway, because you're just goo. And so it's not that everyone was Greg's friend. It's everyone. My experience is people kind of knew where they stood. And there's some people, I may have disagreed with what he said, but I knew he had thought about it. It was an action. It was core to his principles. And I really, in life, the more I go on, the more I appreciate that.
Yeah. Well, when I came in and I first started working with you guys, I mean, you had a really established working relationship. And so you invited me into the show years and years after you had already been doing it. And I actually don't know if I know this story from you, but I'd be curious to hear about how you guys started working together, like how you met him, how you started working together and what that was like, because you had a lot going on by the time.
The decision process of you, because I knew you but didn't know you as well, you know, and you're both brilliant and you present yourself really well. So when I see someone who presents themselves really well, I got to know there's substance behind it as well. So he brought you on. And the great thing about Greg is Greg's a pretty good filter of, do they have the meat and potatoes? But that was a screening, I said. And it all came from a conversation. I don't know who started it, where I go, Greg, well, probably I started it, but he was very open to it. Diversity only occurs with intentionality, because human nature has us attracted to people who look and think like us. It's not right or wrong. And some say it often happens if you're in the majority more than the minority. So I want to acknowledge there's a difference there. But we had a joking conversation. I get, there are just too many white guys on the show. We got to get
all two of them.
Right, all two of them. And so, we thought and we said, we've got to find someone. So we were looking for someone who had the talent and contribution, but also just wasn't another white guy on the show. So we were looking at diversity, African-American, Hispanic, a woman. And so that, I want to say, that came from a discussion. And that was, again, missing something in core values we had, acknowledging it and go, we need to do something about it. And it took a while because we didn't want to just bring someone on as a token gesture. I think that's actually insulting to somebody because it's not honoring the quality of them. And so he did more vetting of you. I knew you and you people thought great about you, but I've been very busy taking care of life. He was the one that first vetted you. And then I got to vet also. And he knew we did. So it's the idea of when you have two people consensus to start with. And I think that's another value that's important to understand. And so I want you to know that's what brought you on the show, and I looked up your LinkedIn. I went, she's got sales background. She's in the trenches. She's doing this. Now you've moved on to other things, which I think are a great match for you. But at the time, your sheepskin and credentials matched a missing piece that we wanted to add. So I want to start with that. Then I want to talk about us getting into the show because Greg and I are an example of a value I have called co-opetition. And I would rather, when Greg came onto the scene, I had been teaching LinkedIn. I joined in 2004, and somewhere around 2006 or 7, I started teaching LinkedIn. And then Greg came on, and he had moved to the area. I didn't know this backstory, but he moved to the area, was looking for a job, and he went, there isn't a good program of using LinkedIn with a group to really help people network. And he created Linking the Triangle, and I could see he either was offering LinkedIn training or something else. And I realized, this guy's on the ball. He's making an effort on it. He's committed. And I reached out to him, and my intention was, we're both doing it. What if we can team up together and make even better product? And so back then it was really on a handshake honor system. I've since learned you can have that, but it's also good to have a written document in case someone forgets what you agree on. But that's where we started, is collaborating together on it, and started teaching LinkedIn training and stuff and looking at it. And then I had a podcast show and had gotten into podcasting, and he brought up the idea of doing it. And Greg is so lightning smart. He could handle the technical things that would have cost us money. And I said, I'll put all the money up front, like the investor, if you do the techie stuff. So that was, again, we had agreements as we went along. And sometimes he was great where he'd go, delegation of roles, because I would want to get into the techie stuff, and he goes, we got an agreement, we need to do what we're best at. So that's where it started. And I just want to say, with linking into sales, that guy brought that up to 10 or 15,000 people and then passed it on. He built something. He saw a need in the community for himself, and he created a fantastic pay-it-forward product or service that added to the community that's still going. And that's the type of people I want to work with. That's how I've often done it. I'll learn a new thing and go, how can I give it away? Not how can I just sell it immediately? How could I give it away if it's a value to community? So that's another value of Greg's. And then we started working together. It was really funny because he goes, you're the guy that likes the stories and you make people laugh. You're funny. And I go, and Greg, you're brilliant. And bring the technical pieces. He's like a sponge for technical data. I mean, just a learning machine like no tomorrow. And so, again, it's the complement that was so attractive with it. And we really built the show not as a moneymaker, but as a networking tool and for us to get in front of people and learn from them. So it was not built intentionally. We later on decided to look on how to monetize it, but it was, we got to meet and connect to people that would have never been as easy, even though we did have credentials, without the show. So that was a piece of it. and then he had great things when he had linking the triangle, because he also had meetings where people could meet, and he'd come up with the idea, and I go, the concept of speed dating, why don't we apply this to business? And I think I've seen someone who's done it. Let's do it. I go, game on, I'll come and help. And so there are a lot of exciting things we did like that really added value to the picture.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, by the time I got there, you guys had been doing so much already, and I didn't realize I was being vetted in that way. You guys were super nice about it. So.
You're right. Now we can tell you the truth.
Now I know. I'm really glad I made the cut. I had I mean, I assumed you'd be doing some of that, but I didn't know what was all going on behind the scenes.
Yeah, no, it wasn't just your charming personality. You had to be smart, and you are.
There had to be a little bit of substance.
No, there was a lot of substance there. No, don't want to take away from that.
Well, I mean, you and I, before we hit record on this, we were just like, how are we even going to do this? Like, it's so crazy that he's gone. But I know we really just want to honor who he is and what he taught us. And just, I'd be curious to hear from you as you think about anything else that you feel like you learned from him, whether in sales, like social selling, like we talked about, or just in life in general. I think he was such a good example of how to live a good life, focus on family, like all those things. I just love to hear. You worked with him so closely. What would you say?
One of the things that was, it's hard to believe, but a great honor to me, is that we built a friendship enough, and you had to earn friendship with Greg, that I'm a huge advocate of the values of fathers in kids' lives. And I'm a huge advocate of relationships and families, and aware of the struggle today to make all that work. And Greg and his wife really chose to have a family where Greg would focus on bringing in the income, and that she would focus on raising the kids. And she's a wicked smart woman too, Jessie, and to work together. And I was a champion of that, because that's, to me, something that takes courage and work. And I want more kids that have both fathers and mothers active in their life. And one of the things that was most touching to me is how he would let me contribute to him. It doesn't mean he bared his soul or something, but he talked about, somebody's now trying to cut in on the kids when he was coaching baseball, or some parent. And I say, let's bring that up together, and work on it, because I am very good, and I've written a book on men's stuff and working with it. And that ability to contribute to him as a man committed to his family and his kids was one of the gifts he gave to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I know his kids and his family were everything to him. And we're probably going to cry talking about this part.
Right.
But, one of the things that's been really interesting to me in this whole thing is just the way that so many people have reached out and said, like, first of all, I can't believe he's gone. But second, like, this is how he impacted me. Or like, so many people knew of him in the Raleigh community where we're from and beyond. But I think that's really the definition of legacy. And that's one of the biggest things that it's had me think about, that I think if we can take any sort of gift from this is just how important it is to be intentional about what you're known for, what you do every day, the way you treat other people. And I think you said it really well, that he was respected. Like, everybody who knows him, I believe, respects him. He is clear on what he believed. He was clear on what he believed in. He was just full of integrity. And I think to see how many people have reached out and said, like, I knew him through so-and-so, and I learned from him, and I studied from him, and he impacted my life. It's like, that is the definition of a life well lived. Even if it ends way earlier than anybody expects. To me, that is having that positive ripple effect. It's really made me re-examine like what I do every day. And I think if we can take anything from that, it's to have his legacy live on, and then also to think about what will our legacies be, and how will we be intentional about thinking about, okay, if this was it for me, like, would I be happy with the impact I've made in the world? Would I be happy with the ripple effect that I've created? So I don't know if it's brought up any of those thoughts or feelings for you? I'm sure it has, but I'd be curious to hear
Yes.
about just maybe how it made you think about
The
or
way,
examine your life.
see, there's a difference between someone aging where you know the end is coming, like my parents, and you
Yeah.
go, the quality of life isn't here anymore. I'm okay. You know, it doesn't mean it doesn't hurt, versus someone whose life was ripped like this, unexpected. And this creates, from talking to my friend Tom Golden on, I have a good friend that's expert on grief, and he said this is kind of like the unknown soldier, where you don't know what happened to him, you know, type of grief. So it's a bigger deal. And my way of doing it is, first, what action can I do that helps the family? You know, the first thing. And then, so that's why I went, I can get the word out and do that. And thank goodness the great GoFundMe. So that's it. And the second is, how can I let this wake me up to life to make sure I'm living my values? And I think unexpected death, and I want to just speak for myself, I use as a wake-up call. Because even though I want to stay awake to my commitments, I fall asleep. You know, there's little ways where I go, wait a second. Now, my wife has a wonderful way of saying, is that what a world-class coach would do? And then, oh, I'm just being a jerk here. You know, but, you know, use it as a wake-up call for a sense of urgency. And I believe life is lived best with a sense of urgency. Now, that's my own values.
Yeah.
But I've used it for that. I've used it to want to make shows like this. This is one of them. You know, I thought, and then the other thing is, I want to be around so that I can tell his kids who he was.
Yeah. Yeah. I know. It's, when I think about what his passing has, and this is something that it's like, I don't know if his kids will ever watch this. But I want them to know how big of an amazing impact he had on the people around him. And even since he passed, it has inspired me to change some things. And, it just, I mean, little stuff, but this is not like, I don't want this to sound self-promotion. I just want to share some of what it's caused me to want to do. Like, I've created a challenge for myself where every day for the next year, I'm committed to doing some small daily act of kindness outside of myself. And I'm talking about it on social media, and people are joining along. And a lot of that was inspired by Greg. It really was. And people are, they're writing to me and they're saying, I'm having conversations with people that I wouldn't have had before, like hard conversations that I was avoiding, but I feel compelled to do this now, just inspired by this challenge and by some of the message here. People are donating their time. People are donating money to causes that they believe in. And so much of that was inspired by Greg, and just by saying, wow, like, we really need to take every single day as if it was going to be our last. And I really hope that his kids and his wife will know, even beyond like people that they know, how he has inspired people and how he is helping people even now, just through his legacy. And so,
yeah. I was thinking, as you're saying that, is my last conversation a few days before his death, we had a challenge with the first person who lost the weight we ideally wanted. The other guy had to buy a suit jacket.
Oh, was that the challenge? I didn't know that was. I knew you guys had like a competition, but yeah.
And we had a competition going. So he had been working to improve his health. We had a conversation, and it was interesting because when he got on the phone and we talked, we had a nice long talk together. I realized it was like unspoken of how much we enjoyed bantering. Okay, and what's your view of this on the politics? What's your new things? Oh, have you heard this? And I was since he was always such a sponge, my win was when I could bring some new technology to him he hadn't found yet. That was my, that was a win for a week for me. It's like,
that's hard to do.
I know. And I'd go, do you know that they just changed this and this in Alexa? And he was like, no. And he was like, he's like, you found that already? That would be one of the examples of it. But remembering that piece of our last conversation, which was our last. And it was funny, when I hung up, I went, I just enjoy working with him. And you were talking about social selling. We hammered out a lot of ideas, and I want to find a way to get it out there. But there were some really good ideas. I'd bring it to him, and then he would go, no, it's not that. And then we'd almost argue through it, and we developed something new. And then we were like, holy crap, we came up with something new. And then we go, now where do we put this? We invented something in a concept.
Yeah.
And that was exciting. And one of the biggest things you asked, I learned in social selling with Greg, is the fact of it is it's still relationship building, like on the ground. It's still, don't become a jerk online, but it's also still, it's pay it forward, but also you have to have discernment because you have limited amounts of time. You might want to give to everyone, but you might need to have some of your stuff, your religious tithing, your business tithing, and then your work. And so that was, to me, one of the core of the concept of social selling is the dignity of the customer and the excitement that the customer is now empowered. I mean, people complain because they've researched everything and they don't know it right and they're coming to them. I'm sorry, the salesman earned that spot by not ethical sales. And I like it. I think the more transparency in this, the more the people who are committed to win-win are going to win. So it's like harder to be a con man in this thing.
Yeah.
So those who are asking some principles we kind of hammered out. Those would be some of them.
Yeah. And I think just the whole, his whole somewhat unique focus in the world of selling and social selling, which shouldn't be unique, but it is, just like you said, that it's always still about the relationship. And it's, I think as we look at the future of the industry, that can be harder and harder to do, to maintain that real relationship with your clients. But the more that people can just kind of go back to like what Greg believed in and what we try to teach on our show, which was it's about the relationship. I mean, I don't know if this was you or him who came up with social selling is about opening, not closing.
No, that was Greg. And that's a great one to give that guy credit for. And I love he got 20,000 hits on it. Go, Greg, we got to do a show on this.
Yeah. I mean, that was massive. So maybe can you share, because you were there for the inception of that. So can you talk maybe a little bit about what that meant to him and what?
Absolutely. What we knew is we knew this whole idea of a funnel, and we both had, something's wrong with this. This looks like a meat grinder of stuffing people at the top, and it stops at sales, and nothing stops at sales. That's a starting point. So that was the background conversation. And then Greg kind of took it and turned it to his opening. And I don't know where it was in free, but he's the one. If he had come up with it, I would say, you need to write an article. If I came up with a piece of it, he's the one that got the article together, so, and then he said, Glenn Ross or one of those shows was such a great one. In fact, I re-watched it after we did this. And then we would sometimes do things. I go, Greg, you need to write this and get this out there. And he put it together. And the idea is that really, first of all, we aren't in a broadcast world we're in a narrowcast. We're building the buyer's journey all the way into the business, even before they are thinking about us. And the sales should be used more of a center point than an end point, where there's equal weight on both sides. And so if you view it as an opening, it's like things narrow down and find down to the customer point occurs, and then it branches out to other opportunities, enhancing relationships, education. So that's why the concept, and I really want to give Greg credit on it, is that the closing of the sale is not a closing but an opening. So that's, to me, and I love it. And I think it's a beginning. So yes, we narrowed down to the point of an agreement, and then we mapped out, but that's an agreement that's a new starting point for building.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's so unique and so true. And whenever I think of him and some of what he taught me, that's always one of the biggest things. And I think that's a big piece of his legacy, just in the work that he did and in the social selling community. As well. So yeah, I mean, this is just as we kind of wrap here. I mean, I don't know, it might be hard to answer this question, but do you have anything else that you would want to share, like for his kids or his wife, if they do what you believe about him?
I do want to have something, because he's got 3 boys and 2 kids. So I'm very interested in that. You know, one is, they got more love from their father than 99% of the dads I see out there. So though it's short, it was condensed. So draw on that, you know? And the other thing is, just know, you know, he's watching over them, and he wants them to be constructive, effective citizens that move with ethics in a world that isn't always ethical, and let your creativity teach you, how do I be an ethical person in a world that it looks like it's hard to be ethical sometimes, you know? And that is the character building quality that I truly believe Greg would nod his head right now and say, you know, that's the sword and the lantern and the shield to draw on from your father. So that's one from me. How about you? Anything you think?
You know, when I think about Greg, I think he felt like a big brother to me. Mm-hmm. You guys both feel like brothers to me. And I would just want them to know that their dad was, like you've said, so smart, so kind. He was always just incredibly kind, very welcoming to me, but he talked about them all the time. Like, his wife and his kids were his life, and everything that he did was for them. And I would just want them to, I think you said it perfectly. Like, I can't say it better than you, just living with integrity and ethics. And I think that's what he believed in. And I mean, I like to think that he's watching this right now and is hopefully nodding his head. I kind of expect to see him next to you.
Right. He earns it now.
Yeah. But just that their father was a really amazing man and made an incredibly positive impact in the community and the world at large with what he did. And just that there's a lot of people who are still touched and moved by him every day and are committed to living their lives the best they can because of him and because of the example that he set, and to just continue his legacy.
Yeah, and I just want to I want to acknowledge a minute his wife and kids, because Jessie, I knew as a powerful, brilliant woman that I got to see indirectly, was playing a dance with him of a role of mother, embracing the kids, and father. And it's kind of like a team where they both were working, and yeah, I'm sure they had their own bumps too, but the goal was, we're here to raise great kids. And the relationship too. I mean, there was, it was both, but it was like, we're working together to raise great children. And you didn't get to go to the funeral, but the courage and behavior of those kids rang out, from them speaking in front of a room full of people at their own dad's funeral to greeting people. That doesn't happen just biologically. You need the biology, you need the temperament, and you just need great parenting that are engaged. And another thing I want to add is, Greg realized his role was to be their father, not their best friend. And I know it didn't mean he wasn't friends with him, but if it came between in a split decision, I got to be a little tougher here and hold the ground, and they're not going to be happy. Greg knew to choose this first because that's what's going to give them something to press against that they can carry their life. And I don't see that often. I see more committed to being a buddy than a father. And again, some would say you can be both, and Greg did. He was both with them. What I'd like to do is just invite people, add their comments. I'm seeking to get some more. Thank you for being on the show. It was great. In fact, you stayed on the show till we just can't time-wise do both of these.
Yeah.
And it was great moments, and maybe we can talk about podcasting as well that we learned from it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I learned so much from both of you about just everything, building a brand, life, podcasting, and it was a really generous thing of you guys to bring me on, and it helped me meet amazing people and build a reputation as well, which was it was something you guys had built and you invited me in, and that was extremely generous, and I'm always grateful for that as well. But I know just the more that we can continue to get the word out, and I know we're still fundraising for Jesse and the family. Can you tell people a little bit about where
absolutely.
they
There's a GoFundMe, and even though Chris that created the goal, it was an arbitrary goal of 50,000. Thank you for everyone who contributed. There were people who knew me and didn't even know Greg that donated considerable money, and that was such an honor as well. And so you can keep donating to that GoFundMe. It's okay. We can bring it to 100,000. I think they can, because they need more than just money, but money can't hurt in helping them. So I'll be putting the GoFundMe link in the comment area to make sure to do it. So when you go there and see goal reach, that's just an arbitrary thing. If you're moved by this or anything else, I ask that you donate something and share it. There's 5 beautiful kids and a wife that are now putting the pieces together and working to build the next, move forward with it. So I do ask, if you're moved by this, moved by Greg, haven't donated, actually make a contribution. You can cut a sandwich out of your life for a few cups of coffee, right?
Yes, it's a good way to put it. Skip one sandwich.
Yeah, right.
It will still be okay. It'll still be okay.
Well, we'll come up with more, Elyse, but this is part of it. Thanks so much for being the first. And we're working to see how I might be able to keep moving this forward. There are a lot of mechanics in it, but my hope is to do it.
Yeah. Thank you so much. And thank you too for organizing. And you've been really a champion of just wanting to honor him and his legacy and put this together. And so I want to let you know that I appreciate you doing it. And I think everybody who's listening hopefully appreciates as well. So thank you.
Yeah. And thanks for your work as well. Excellent. Great.